Most conversations about AI agents sound very confident right now. People talk about autonomous systems, self directed reasoning, minimal human involvement, and if you look at demos, that confidence seems justified. Agents plan tasks, they call tools, they recover from small errors, they appear to reason their way through complexity. In isolation, these behaviors look like autonomy. They look like systems that can operate independently, make decisions, and adapt in real time. But those impressions are shaped almost entirely by the environment they are shown in, and that matters more than most people realize. But inside real companies, quietly and without press releases, AI agents are failing far more often than people admit. Not because the models are weak, but because production environments are not demos, and that difference is where almost all agent systems break. When you watch an AI agent demo, you are seeing a very specific environment: clean inputs, a narrow task, a clear objective, a defined start and end, no ambiguity about what success looks like. There are no competing priorities, no missing information, no unclear ownership, no real downstream consequences. Nothing unexpected interrupts execution. Nothing external changes the rules mid task. Nothing forces the system to reevaluate intent. The agent knows what matters and what does not. That is not autonomy, that is containment. It is performance inside carefully chosen boundaries. Demos work because the environment is forgiving. Production environments are not. Production is messy. Context is incomplete. Information arrives late or out of order. Ownership is unclear. Interruptions happen. Edge cases dominate. Dependencies shift without warning. Priorities conflict. Constraints appear after decisions are made. And the moment an agent enters that environment, its performance stops being about intelligence. It becomes about systems. It becomes about how work is structured, how responsibility is assigned, and how failure is handled. What most teams discover very quickly is this: once an agent is in production, model quality is no longer the bottleneck. The model is usually good enough, it can reason, it can plan, it can generate plausible next steps. Failures cluster somewhere else entirely. They happen at handoffs. They happen at orchestration boundaries. They happen when systems need to coordinate over time. They happen when something unexpected occurs. They happen when no one is sure which component should act next. Agents do not fail because they cannot reason. They fail because they do not understand how work actually flows. Production is not a reasoning test, it is a workflow test. And most workflows were never designed for autonomous systems. They were designed for humans who can interpret ambiguity, fill gaps, and make judgment calls without explicit instructions. Humans compensate silently for missing structure. Agents cannot. There is still a dominant idea in the public conversation that sounds logical, but is wrong. If agents were truly autonomous, humans would not be involved. Reality is the opposite. The more agentic a system becomes, the more human scaffolding it requires. Autonomy increases surface area. It increases the number of possible states the system can enter. It increases failure modes. It increases coordination complexity. It increases accountability risk. More decisions means more places things can go wrong. Someone still has to own outcomes. Someone still has to decide what matters. Someone still has to resolve ambiguity. Someone still has to handle exceptions. Someone still has to decide when the system should stop. Autonomy does not remove humans from the system. It changes where humans sit in the system. It shifts them from execution to oversight, from doing the work to managing the consequences of the work. What companies are actually building are not autonomous agents. They are agent-assisted workflows, and that distinction matters far more than the labels suggest. If you look closely at real deployments, failures show up in the same places again and again. First, workflow misspecification. Agents are often given goals, not processes. They are told what the outcome should be, but not how work actually unfolds. Real work requires sequencing, dependencies, stopping rules, fallback paths. Without those, agents drift or stall. They continue acting, but without alignment to the larger system. Second, orchestration gaps. Multiple agents exist, but no clear logic governs who acts when. No system decides which agent has priority. No mechanism resolves conflicts. No structure defines escalation. Coordination becomes implicit instead of explicit. Third, exception handling. Demos assume happy paths. Production is mostly edge cases, unexpected inputs, partial failures, conflicting signals. Agents struggle here because exceptions are not reasoning problems. They are system design problems. Fourth, context collapse. Critical information gets lost across tools, steps, or time. The agent technically continues working, but with an incomplete picture. Outputs still arrive, but they are increasingly disconnected from reality. And finally, ownership ambiguity. When something breaks, no one is clearly responsible. Not the model, not the agent, not the human. Systems without ownership decay quickly. None of these are model problems. They are infrastructure problems. This is why the public conversation feels increasingly disconnected from reality. Discussion is still focused on models, benchmarks, reasoning scores, autonomy claims. Inside companies, the work has already moved on. Teams are focused on orchestration layers, monitoring systems, guardrails, human handoff design, failure containment. They are trying to make systems survivable, not impressive. The industry did not slow down. The conversation simply did not keep up. What looks like hesitation from the outside is often deep operational work on the inside. What this ultimately reveals is a change in how progress should be judged. Early progress was visible. It showed up in demos and benchmarks. This phase of progress is quieter. It shows up in fewer incidents, clearer ownership, cleaner handoffs, more predictable behavior under stress. These improvements rarely look impressive in isolation, but they determine whether systems hold together over months and years. They determine whether autonomy compounds value or compounds risk. And they force organizations to move away from spectacle and toward durability. AI agents are not disappearing, but they are no longer experimental novelties. They are becoming infrastructure-dependent components. And infrastructure changes how technology is evaluated. The core question has shifted. Not can an agent do this task, but can this system survive real workflows? Can it degrade gracefully? Can failures be isolated? Can humans intervene cleanly? Can responsibility remain clear? These are not abstract concerns. They determine whether systems scale or quietly fail. That shift changes how teams are staffed, how systems are designed, how accountability is assigned, how success is measured. Intelligence is no longer the constraint. Coordination is. This is also why the most useful progress indicators are not new benchmarks. They are operational indicators. How often does the system need a human rescue? How often does it fail silently? How often does it route work to the wrong owner? How often does it create downstream cleanup? When those numbers move in the right direction, agents become real components, not because they are more intelligent, but because they are more governable. In practice, that means organizations start treating agent behavior like any other production system. They define what the system is allowed to do. They define what it is not allowed to do. They define where uncertainty is escalated. And they define what done means before anything runs. None of this is exciting, but it is the difference between a demo that impresses once and a workflow that holds up every day. This is the hidden reason autonomy debates go in circles. One side is arguing about capability. The other side is living inside responsibility. Capability answers the question, can it do the task? Responsibility answers the question, Who absorbs the cost when it does the wrong thing? Production is where responsibility dominates, because the cost of being wrong is real. Time is lost. Trust erodes. So the real frontier is not more clever planning. It is clearer boundaries, clearer handoffs, and clearer failure containment. Quiet. AI agents did not fail. They reached the point where infrastructure matters more than intelligence. That is not a setback. It is what happens when a technology leaves theory and enters the real world. And the organizations that understand this quietly will be the ones whose systems actually work.